the North American Amish population seems to double about every 20 years. This is held fairly consistent for the last 100 years. How are they doing this? And what can we learn from them? Now, I obviously do not agree with everything they believe, otherwise I would be Amish. However, I do think we can learn some things from them on growing their group. Now, as Christendom in general seems to be on the decline in the United States, the Amish are doubling every 20 years. This is interesting, and I think we should really take note. This is Daniel from iApologia.com, advancing the Christian worldview. Before we get into the 8 ways that we can learn from the Amish, please smash the like button down below. The first item I want to get into about the Amish and why they double in population about every 20 years is because of their families. The Amish in this article says that the Amish are projected to overtake the current U.S. population in 215 years. This is crazy. So let's go down here. Let's just read a few of the items here. Over the past 100 years, the Amish population has doubled every about 20 years. And then if we keep going down, we see a graph where we see an exponential growth curve here where it's growing faster and faster. It looks like this, the last date was 2017. The article goes on to say that the average Amish family is much larger than the typical American family. The typical American family has 1.9 children. However, the Amish have 6 to 7 children per family. And some conservative Amish settlements have higher fertility rates than even this. This point here says this, that they're doubling the population every 21 to 22 years, probably because of the large families and their children pretty much stay with their church. And then there's a population growth curve where it's projected, the numbers right there, and you can look at these numbers later. I leave the link to this article down below. Let's just go back up here. We'll use that as a backdrop just as we finish off the other 7 items why the Amish seem to be growing much faster than the rest of the church. Now, here's the thing. It's not just families. It's not just having large families. Second off, we have to think about that they actually train their kids to stay with the church. I just made that point earlier that a lot of them are staying with the church. Now, not all of them do, but a lot of them do. And that's essential for the growth of the church. Now, you could say, oh, we should be evangelizing the world. Well, of course, but the rest of the world is dying off, in the West at least. So we should be evangelizing our families. If you want to change the culture, change your family and change your family now. But before you change your family, you have to change you. And so to do that, you have to think about as adults, what about our marriages? So the first one is large families. The second one is train your kids and train them well. And the third one is having strong marriages. And having strong marriages starts with you and me. So you can blame your spouse about whatever you want to blame your spouse about, but you need to have marital fidelity, period. This American church item where we think that we can divorce willy-nilly is killing the church quite literally. So, as the American church, let's take note. This is essential. They take their marriages seriously. They take their marriages seriously as a church, as a culture, and they also take the Bible seriously on the topic of marriage, which it doesn't seem like the rest of the church is doing. So, if you really want to follow Christ, let's start in these 3 big areas right now. Now, obviously, the Bible does not say you have to have massive families. That's not my point. But the Bible does say, though, that you should have strong families, including strong teaching and training for your kids, and strong relationships. And the Bible is not against having large families. Let's put it that way. Fourth, culture. See, the Amish have a very tight culture. Now, I'm not advocating for us to live like the Amish. That's not my point at all. However, a lot of times we as a church seem to say, hey, the rest of the culture is doing this. Let's do that. Well, why should we follow the rest of the culture? I'm not saying there's wrong ways to follow the rest of the culture, but why can't we not follow society? Why can't we just follow Christ? And if Christ does something different, why do we have to follow culture? We can stand out. I'm not saying intentionally stand out, but if Christ says something, do it. This is not an issue. We need to have that cultural element where we go back to the Bible, and that builds our foundation for our culture. And if we do that, we will stand out, and we need to stick with that. Now, obviously, the Amish go beyond that, and they have their very unique culture that they promote, but it's also a simplicity of life. Now, it's hard work, obviously, but it's a little more simple as well. So they have this lot more family-focused, community-focused life. And that's my fifth point, community-focused. They have this very strong community where they're helping each other out. When you're in the Amish community, you're in the Amish community. If you want to think of it as a closed back door, they're committed to each other. They're dedicated to each other. Rarely do people leave the Amish church. Now, or the Amish community, if you want to put it that way. Now, I'm not saying that people don't, nor am I saying that that's always a good thing to, where people cannot leave as well or do not leave as well. But I think as Christians, so many times I've seen Christians just kind of walk in and out of churches like, this church is not good enough for me. I'm looking for the perfect church because I'm the perfect person, or something like that. Not quite, but you get my point. Let's have a little more commitment, a little more dedication, and grow the culture of the church in a much stronger way. The sixth item here is entertainment. They use their time much more wiser than the rest of the world. That includes the Christian church. They don't get caught up in a lot of the entertainment of the world, such as the music. Well, some of the younger kids maybe do, but the adults are not supposed to, at least. They're not interested in the secular entertainment, such as the movies and the sports. Now, that does not mean that they're not interested in sports. I think they do, like doing different sporting activities, but they're not interested in all the pro sports. They're focused on other things. They're focused more on their community and enjoying each other instead of trying to find some sort of idol to follow. So that's entertainment. So 7 is the next one, and that's focused more on their life than theology. This is not to say that theology is not important to them. It just means that they're more interested in the Christian walk, if you want to think of it that way. The behavior of a Christian over the theology of a Christian. That does not mean, again, that they don't focus on theology. It's just that they have much less of an emphasis on theology. Now, this does raise some concerns, which I don't have to get into here, but it does help prevent or slow down some of the division that happens in the rest of the church on the theological issues. That does not mean they don't have division. They seem to divide on other issues, which is another whole topic. Now, the last and 8th item that I think we can learn from the Amish is something that I'm not totally sure if it impacts their growth, but I think it is something that we can learn from them. And it is something that I just lumped a few things together that I think are somewhat true overall, not maybe universally, like any group of people, but overall we can assume this in most Amish people, is that they're hardworking, industrial, and humble as they go about their daily life. So one of the people I've known in my life is a guy who was a former Amish who now, well, the time I met him, he was working with some other people in a different church, more of an Anabaptist type of church. And as I get to know this guy, he was very soft-spoken, very humble, but very hardworking, which kind of gave me a lot of respect for him. So now, again, he exited the Amish church, but they still looked a lot like the Amish in their actions. And they didn't live a pompous life. Rather, they lived a very humble life, but they were very hardworking. And I think this is powerful if we can take that and learn from this exact point. There you have it. If you have thoughts or comments, feel free to share them down below. If this video was of value to you, feel free to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share this on all your social media platforms. With that, go out and give your world Christ.